The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm TOVAH Copan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast where we celebrate women stepping into power and living their most authentic lives. We are also thrilled to be a part of the Power Moms Network. At Power Moms Network, we are empowering moms and creating a community of mothers mentoring other moms to greatness. Check it out online. We would love to have you visit us there. It is a cool community. Before we dive in, we have an interview today. As everyone knows, I get very excited about interviews. I know TOVAH does too, but I usually yell about it first. But I just want to remind everyone, we have our We Go Boldly Weekly Women's Circle. That is a lot of W's. It is a great place to come if you are struggling, if you're thriving, if you're looking for people to, commune with, connect with, share energy with, all of those good things. We would love to have you there. We meet every week. We talk about all the stuff we talk about on the podcast, but in, greater detail and more personalized. You can find out more on our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/weekly circle. And like I said, we would love to have you join us there. It's one of my favorite parts of my week. So all of that being said, it's interview day. I'm going to say hi to TOVAH real quick and get her on, and then we're going to dive in. So hi, TOVAH. What's happening? How are you writing your story this week?
Well, we added a new player to our story this week. We added a new
I gave you a softball there. I was like,
yeah,
but I'll lead it in with your new
I
new
appreciate
character.
that. You could have asked me anything, and then I've been like, we got a dog.
I know. I wanted a good transition for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Some people might be like, hey, the world is crashing down upon you. We have too much on your plate. But listen, like when all the therapists in your life are like, I think a dog would be good for your family, like eventually you finally listen. And we are fostering because it's good for the world it's good for the world to just foster, I like to foster humans, I like to foster dogs, I just like to welcome people into our community. And it's also helpful because we have some allergies and stuff in our family. We just want to make it a good fit for our family. But so far, everybody is kind of madly in love with this little man who hasn't even been with us for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sleeping right next to me. And so this is very exciting for me right now. I'm like giddy to have like the dog sleeping next to me.
I mean, it's kind of, this is going to sound terrible. It's kind of like having houseplants. I mean, it's in the sense that it brings a different energy into your space, right? Like some people, you can't have pets or whatever. You're just not an animal person. Cool. But like you get houseplants and suddenly the whole vibe of your space is different. And it's because it's life. It's bringing life into your space. And I think, for me, I'm a cat and dog person. So that is great. And I think I love having that energy around.
I can like make it even like a worse analogy like than houseplants is like it's like having a good mug. Like I think sometimes when you just like add something in your life that is like bringing you joy, that like every day you open up your cabinet and there's like a joyful mug. You don't even have to use it that day.
No, you just see it, right?
Yeah, and you're like, oh man. Or like those great socks. You're like, look at those good socks. So we are excited. And so look for, a lot of updates. Also, I don't put my kids on social media, so get ready, world.
So many dog pictures. That's what I do. My cat is all over my Instagram.
Yeah, now I finally have a kid that I can put on social media.
Totally. All right, well, let's move on to our topic. I think that was relevant to our topic because, as everyone knows, season 12, all about being the author of your story, right? Being in there's so many analogies, being in the driver's seat, charting the course, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Being the person in your head, talking to yourself, making the decisions and choosing sort of whatever destiny that you want to have. So we've been interviewing folks about their story, how they got to where they're going, all of those good things. And today we have a fantastic guest for you guys. I've been hearing, and he doesn't know this, I've been hearing about him for a long time from TOVAH. And that sounds creepy, but it's not a creepy thing. It's like, this guy is really cool. We should talk to him. So today, everybody, we are talking to Chris Barrows. He is a digital marketer spanning over 15 years of experience with a heavy focus in social media marketing and community building. He spent more than 10 years working in higher education and emphasizes education as critical to one's lifelong journey. So he's the co-founder of, so many things. Traveling Boards. He's the host of Why I Social podcast, and he works as a marketing consultant for a variety of businesses and startups. He's an active member in his local community, currently completing the first of what he hopes to be many terms as a trustee at the Verona Public Library, which I think is super cool and I want to hear about. And he is also the creator of the Tabletop Express, a YouTube channel focused on the board game hobby, where his team hosts live board game call-in shows twice a month. So many cool things going on there. Chris, we're thrilled to have you on the show. Welcome. Talk to us a little bit about how you're doing today and what's going on in your world today.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. Really a pleasure to be here. And it's so interesting in terms of just the topic that you're talking about. It's been a journey. And Tova's heard from this story from me before, but I spent some time, a long time in higher education, and I loved it. I was passionate, but no growth. And so in my journey, eventually I got into corporate, and that's really where the story begins for me. I feel like because in essentially nearly 5 years in corporate, I got burnt out. I went through job loss, layoffs, bad bosses, you name it. Every scenario under the sun, I felt like I went through it. And this entire time, I've always had people would always call them side hustles, and I hated the word because I never thought about it as a hustle. Like I was just trying to do something I liked, right? Like I wasn't. It was never really about the money. It was just me trying to find enjoyment, right? And money happened to be a part of it for some of them, but uh, ultimately, after I just a third time going through a job loss, I said, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" And I set on a path to kind of build a life for myself where I was happy because I realized I had not truly been happy probably in a long time in the professional space. So for me, that's what this past 6 months has been about. It's been tough. It's been challenging, financially difficult at times, but it's been the right path. And that's the really nice thing. And that's why I love the topic today because courting your own, creating the course for your own path is challenging. And still not sure I know exactly what I'm doing at times, but I'm, I'm trying to say the least.
Yeah. I think most of us don't know what we're doing at times. And randomly, and normally it's Tova with these bits of pop culture information, but I was listening to the actual radio this morning, which is a weird thing to do in and of itself. And they were talking about Justin Bieber. And he apparently recently, and I haven't verified this, so if I'm wrong, please don't like crucify me, everybody. But apparently he's been posting on his Instagram about essentially imposter syndrome. He's not calling it that, but that's what it is. And like you think about this kid, he's not a kid anymore, I guess, but he is like a bajillionaire, right? Like he's super famous. He's had huge success, like way more than most pop stars, even. And yet he's going on Instagram being like, I don't feel worthy. Like, I don't feel like I deserve this success. I don't like, so I think it's really important to notice those things happening around us so that we can be like, okay, well, whether you like his music or his persona or whatever is irrelevant to the fact that he is super traditionally successful. And yet he's still going, well, do I really deserve this? Am I really good at this? Those kinds of things. So that just reminded me of that, hearing that this morning. Tova, I jumped over you. I think you were about to say something, but
No, I don't know that I was, but I do wonder because um I know that you went from Chris, you went from like higher ed to corporate, and you have thought about for a while, like maybe making this leap to saying like, okay, we're gonna do the thing on my own and figure out how we can do it. Um, how like so we have this big question where we kind of say like how do you develop this vision for your future? Or how do you go about writing your own story? But I guess my question is because you're in the middle of writing your own story and you're sort of like which I love that we're talking about you right now, because like last week we talked to our guest who has a successful physical therapy practice. And so she's certainly not at the end of her story by any stretch, but she like has a successful business and it's taken her different pathways. But I wonder like when you envisioned your future, maybe as a kid or in high school or whatever, what did that look like? And what does it look like now? Is it the same now? And was it different in the middle? And maybe that's why it wasn't a good fit? Or is it different now? Like I guess that's my question. Like, because I think sometimes we have to go back to what we thought it was when we were a kid. And then sometimes what's really happening is we're taking a totally different direction.
Apologize. I had a technical difficulty there with my light. So let me just fix this. If you guys don't mind, I apologize. There we go. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's a little bright in my face, but that's fine. So to answer your question, I think one of the biggest things for me is as a kid, I love theater. Theater was life for me. And theater I want to do. I actually went to school to do theater, and in the process of doing this, learned that I am not a triple threat, and this was probably not going to work out because I could not dance. I have no ability to dance. I'm horrible. I could sing, I could act. I liked being on stage. I liked being a performer. So part of where I am now makes sense because education very often is a performance in teaching board games I've got a chance in the past. I've had some strange and different roles past. I mean, in December of the past year, as we're recording this, I literally was a host on a service that did The Feud, which is essentially was the Family Feud. They cannot say that, but they could be The Feud. So I was hosting essentially The Feud, and I was doing that virtually for doing it for corporate events, which was very different, right? So I've been a performer for a long time, so I think some of it makes sense to me. But did I expect to be where I am today? No. And I think I struggled, and a lot of people do struggle with this, in knowing what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do as I went to college, even though I was decided in communications, I knew I wanted to communicate in some way. I studied broadcast. I was learning how to do and shoot and edit video. And then I did an internship. And I said, I don't want to edit other people's stuff. So that's probably a clue in retrospect to myself. Like, I don't want to do someone else's stuff, right? Because I was editing like car commercials. I was like, this is horrible. Like, I don't want to do this. This is not fun. So part of that journey, I think, has been just discovering it. But part of it's also discovering yourself because I had to figure out who I was as a person. I had to figure out what made me happy. I had to come to terms with a lot of things about myself that I presently have found, but honestly, some of the stuff I only figured out the past few years. So I think that was part of it. In terms of professionally, I couldn't have told you I'd be here because as much as I liked board games and other things as a kid, board games are so central to my life. And when I say they're central to my life, it's not just professional. So like I started a company, Traveling Boards, recently, where I have a partner. We do board game events and all these other fun things, but we are growing. This is in no way providing enough income for me to pay my bills, right? We're just trying to do new stuff. And it's cool, but I also had the YouTube channel that we're doing, and all those connections are important, but it's not professional that they're most important for. They're most professional for me personally because they got me through some of the hardest times of my life. And it's been, people talk about faith or spirit, their spirituality or whatever it might be. I have long said my church is almost like the church of board games because it has gotten me through the hardest times. It's my community. And often when we talk about things that get people through, that's what it is. And that's why community has always been important to me. So I think the thing that stands true to back when I was a kid is community being essential to my life. It was the theater community then who got me through hard times. And now it's a board game community, but still it's community that is still the same. The jobs have changed, the professions have changed. If anyone looks at my LinkedIn, you're going to say, you have like 40 things listed here. And it's true because I've had a lot of freelance opportunities. And so I was always doing something, but there's a community behind most of the things that you see. And that's probably the parallel or the line that's running across everything I've done.
I want to circle back to something you said in the beginning, Chris. You were talking about sort of moving from higher ed to corporate to now. And you highlighted that you realized what you really wanted was to be happy, right? And it was a feeling, not an outcome. It was like, I want to feel happy. And I think sometimes, oftentimes, especially culturally now, we forget that it's not about the outcome necessarily. I mean, we all have to pay bills, we have mortgages, we have rent, we have whatever, we have life to deal with, but we only get one life that we know of, right? And so I think we forget to focus on like, how do we want to feel going through that life? Is it something, did you have to come to that realization or have you, or is that like kind of how you were raised to focus on like, you know, who do I want to be? Not like, what do I want to do? Right. Like how do I want to exist in the world? And to that end, like, is community something that you always had? I mean, community to me is actually belonging, right? Instead of fitting in. And I know so many of us struggle with that as we get, through like middle school age and high school and all that stuff. Is really hard to find a sense of belonging. And I know for me, I didn't get it until like, I don't know, the last 10 years. And so I guess I haven't really asked you a question yet. I'm sorry. But I would like to understand like family dynamics. Did you guys talk about this? Is this something that was a part of your upbringing? Like, how do you get to the point where you're like, you know what, really, I need to focus on like joy or happiness or, feeling like I'm providing something for someone, whatever it is.
Yeah, my family probably wouldn't love my answer because not that I don't think they wanted me to be happy, right? Like they did. They let me try things. But it was really something that came later in life when I realized, I really didn't like this or I didn't want to do this. And a lot of it was, I almost say it felt procedural growing up. Like we had a thing, like I did Boy Scouts and I did it all the way. And I still always have this memory of I did Boy Scouts and I didn't get, senior patrol leader. I got senior patrol leader, but I never got like Eagle Scout because I decided to stop doing it, which I always felt disappointed my parents actually at the time, but I stopped it because I was told you can either be part of like your senior patrol or you can do theater. And I said, no, I want to do theater. So I've always gone towards the joy, but I didn't always embrace that it was something that I needed.
Yeah.
And it is belonging because when I talk about those periods in my life, I needed these people and they got me through the hardest of times. So, high school is tough, right? People can be cruel, but I felt like I was in the right place whenever I was on a stage, whenever I was, with those people, whether it was at the restaurant after the show or, you know, in the moment with the lights on you, right? So, and I will say, I think this is important, and anyone who's done theater, I think this will resonate for. When you're in that moment, even those people who can be cruel and heartless to you, they see a confidence when you step on a stage in front of whether it be 500 people or 1,000 people, whatever the number is, and they say, well, they're fearless, right? So I think that's part of it. But to the point of the community piece, I think I always craved it, but I didn't always have it. So I had it in theater. I went to college. I had a good group of friends. I had it, and I went through a period of time where I kind of struggled to find it again. I found it again, like I say, with this overall community in I think board gaming, part of which I created. I mean, I created around my channel, and what's really interesting is it's not a particularly large channel, and partially because we do things differently. We don't focus as much on some of the stuff that all the standard channels are doing. But it relates back to also almost in the business sense of I couldn't do the standard things that maybe advanced me professionally in corporate. I couldn't, I don't want to say suck up, but I couldn't tell a CEO or an executive something that I didn't, it'd say, yes, I agree when I didn't agree. I had no ability to do that whatsoever. And maybe that's, And that's not smart per se, maybe in that moment, but I just could not do it. I had no ability to be that way. And in that same moment, we had no ability to, with our channel to just say, we're going to do it how everyone else did. We want to do it our own way. And so we focused on community. So even though we're a small channel, it was really, and we are, but we have success because we have a community that honestly comes, watches our stuff, and then ends up buying the game. So these reviewers just keep sending us stuff, so because people are buying it because we have a small but engaged community. And so community's at the heart of it. And like I said, it's both professional and personal. And that drove later business decisions for me and even being confident enough to say, hey, maybe we can actually do a business where we do board game events. There's enough in this hobby, right? Uh, and then that gave me the confidence to say, you know what, this isn't going to be enough, but I'm confident to go out there and get other business to support this because I really want all this stuff to succeed. And that's been the hardest part of the journey is, as you mentioned, the money's not always there, right? But at some point you have to take the moment and say, this is the time, this is the now. And that now honestly was when I got hit with a job loss. Was very confusing. I really wasn't sure why I lost the job. Um, I don't delve into the story very often, but I wasn't sure why I lost the job. And even when I applied for unemployment, they couldn't tell me. They said, "Well, no, you're good." They gave no reason. So I went into a scenario where I was like, "What am I doing? Am I just going to look for a job again?" And candidly, I did. Just so you know, I did look, and I looked in education again. And even in education, I was coming up a little short, just like runner up to roles. So it was a really easy decision to move ahead, but I did it with the blessing of my wife at the time. And she's my partner, and I want her to be part of it. And she said, yes, as long as we can pay the bills, right? And so that was part of it. There is a conversation that has to happen there, in my opinion, but it was a very easy decision at the same time.
Yeah, I think and Toval, I'm not going to take up all the time, but I do think we need to take a break actually. But so before we do that, I want to note that like if your day job is a 9 to 5 job and you show up and you do your work and you go home and then, some other part of your life fulfills those values that you hold dear, right? Like your personal values, as long as your day job isn't like the antithesis of your values. Um, I think that people can be okay with that, right? Like we don't have to. I am like you, Chris. Like I can't be in a corporate setting and not like agree with I just can't do it. But other people can, and that's cool. Like there's nothing wrong with that if that's your way of being, as long as you find something that aligns with your values. Because if we're not living our values, we're not going to find that happiness, the contentment, the joy. We're always going to be like, oh, something's missing, and maybe not realize what it is. Tova, I'm going to have us take a quick break. And when we come back, you can dive in if that's all right.
Yeah, that works for me.
We'll be right back after this break, everyone. Well, hey there, Dream Chaser. Are you ready to make the next 12 months of your life unforgettable? Introducing the Year of You, a groundbreaking new goal system group that's about to redefine the way we approach personal growth. Join us with a community of like-minded individuals committed to unlocking their full potential. With expert guidance, personalized strategies, kind-hearted accountability, and a supportive network, the Year of You is more than just a goal-setting group. It's a whole movement. Don't just dream about it, achieve it. Click in the link in our show notes, or go ahead and visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/year of you to learn more today. Let's embark on a transformative journey together towards becoming the best versions we can be. The Year of You, where your goals become reality.
Okay, welcome back. So I have so many questions. And it is always hard for me to ask questions of somebody that I know really well because like I'm like, wait, do I know that because you just said it, or do I already know it, or how do I know these things?
Right. Or is it inappropriate for me to bring this up right now? Because I've known you for however long. Yeah.
Yeah. But and then I'll be like, wait, but I already know the answer to that question. I'm like, yeah, but nobody else does. But I guess one of my questions, and you talked about it a little bit, but would love to hear you flesh it out a little more. Like if you had to give advice to somebody who was feeling stuck or unsure about how to take charge of their own story, because you said, you said something interesting. You just said that like after your last job loss, and I remember talking to you a number of times about it because you were really frustrated, right? Like, and not to go in, but to just share what you just said, which was like you weren't totally sure why it's happened, and that is so frustrating. Um, and you said, you were looking for other opportunities, but at the same time, it wasn't leading to anything, and so it almost felt like you were, I don't know if you felt like you were being sent a sign or if it was just like let's just do it. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid and see if we can make this work. Um, but if you're giving advice to somebody else who was feeling stuck or feeling unsure in how to kind of take charge of their own future, knowing that you are doing just that right now, what advice would you give them?
I think you build a solid foundation for it, and it is the best advice I can give. And again, I think in those moments, sometimes you wish you could go back in time. But one thing I did throughout my career is I built these relationships. I kept those connections. You'll see very active on LinkedIn in particular. And I keep those connections to the point that I'm actually following up with people and saying, hey, how have things been? Like, I keep that world active and open because you never know when someone can come back. I don't have like some big website for my consulting. I have people who've come to me who know of what I do, and I build it. So it's very word of mouth and based on those relationships. But I built all this stuff over time. One of the things I tell people immediately, if they were to ask me something like that, I'd say, well, what is your passion? What would you love to do? And start finding a way to do that when you're not at work. Because to what was also mentioned, I was doing a lot of this stuff on the side. I was finding that enjoyment. The issue was time. So whether it was travel, like for example, I was at NYU for 6.5 years. I loved being at NYU, but the travel was killing me. I did not want to work in New York City anymore. So I had to get out. That's actually why I ended up in corporate. And when I think about all this, it's make some time for something you care about and dedicate to it though. Like, don't just say you're going to do it. You got to do it and then build up that. And then you gain that a little bit of that confidence, but you have these examples you can go to. So I built up the contracting work by doing the work. And one of the places, just as an example, I think it applies is I wanted to do more in the contracting side, but I had to take on work either pro bono or even do something at a really low rate. And I was doing it on the side. I had to make sure it wasn't a conflict of interest. It was a pain. It was a gigantic pain. But I made the time to do it because I wanted other options. I wanted an escape hatch of sorts, right? And so I tell people, build your escape hatch. So if you want to get out of what you're doing, you can. And my wife's in career services, so I've learned for a long time, your degree doesn't tell you what your job's going to be, and your current job doesn't mean it's going to be your job in 10 years. So you can change careers, you can change what you're doing, and it is all possible, but you have to dedicate to it. And if you're not willing to do that, you can't go 50-50. It's not going to work. Because until I went 50-50, until I went, full force, not 50-50, I wasn't able to get this to work. And it took time. It took months to maybe get to a point where I felt like, okay, we can pull enough income, right? But there was a plan in place. So you have to be willing to dedicate. But when you're not able to dedicate, build that up. Again, set the structure of what could be and see what happens. You don't need to leave that, 9 to 5 right away. You can start the process, right? And don't be afraid to do that. But be willing to dedicate. If you can't, dedicate to it, you're not going to succeed in it anyways. So you have to put that time. And I would argue plan it out a little bit, try to map out what you want to do, even if it's not like an in-depth strategy. Give yourself goals and try to follow those. So, whether it's just a Google Doc that just says, here's the 10 things I want to get done, here's how I'm going to do it, or an in-depth piece of organizational planning if you're that type of person. It doesn't matter. And there's a lot of templates for those online that I also tell people. So goal setting, if you look up goal setting, I like SMART goals personally. So I put SMART goals for everything in my life. So I just tell people, look up SMART goals. They work really well. And that at least gets you on a path. But come up with what maybe that side thing is, right? I don't want to call it a side hustle, but find your passion project and start to work on it. and who knows what's going to happen with it. You never know if it's going to take off. I have a friend, I'll just say, who has been on my podcast, and she had started a store selling these just little cards that go and just they make you feel better. They're these happy little cards that have these wonderful things. They say thank you or whatever else they may be, and it turned into a gigantic business for her through TikTok and other areas to the point that she was out there literally talking to congressmen and women about TikTok and why it's important as a small business for her as a small business and amazing stories from people who side projects, passion projects turned into life, that on a daily basis. And yeah, but you got to start. You
Yeah.
can't be afraid to start,
Yeah.
even if it's just one scary step forward, take the step.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, everyone gets afraid. Everyone like in different ways at different times, but fear seeps in, right? And like taking risks can feel overwhelming to a lot of us. What do you do when and I'm sure this has happened to you where you've had a day where you're just like, nothing's really working out. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm feeling afraid. Like, what have I done? Um, I know I felt that when I left my law practice. I was like, oh, that was a big decision. Um, and what do you do to help yourself stay motivated or to like work through those sort of big feelings about what you're doing?
For me, I have the things that just bring me kind of peace, right? Peace of mind, and I find what those things are. So I I laugh about it. One won't shock people because it is. I do play board games to get peace of mind. That is one thing I do. But a lot of times it's music. So I listen to music. I've got music that kind of soothes me, right? I am a big communicator in the sense I've got a lot to say, and I've got wonderful people in my life. And sometimes I have people that I will just have a call, not for therapy for myself, but just to catch up with. And it's that contact with another human being. It might be in person, it might be a phone call, it might be over. One of my best friends is, across the globe, and I talk to her every day. So people are at the heart of it. So I build that foundation again of a support system for myself. And I know that not everyone may have that. So you need to find some way to find something that I think brings you joy, even in the most simple of ways in those moments, and know and remind yourself that you are important. And I say this, and I'm very transparent about my life story, which is when I was young, I went through a very difficult stage and I nearly made bad decisions about my life. I considered, is my life worth it? And I say that because so many people go through that. This is more important now, I think, than ever before. Um, and if you look at it, you look at the amount of people, not just teenagers, but it's in particular in teenagers, uh, you look at the amount of people who feel suicidal thoughts, right? And so finding that, I'm a fan of the show Lost, and there's a concept in the show Lost of finding your constant. So you have to find whatever is your constant, and that's not necessarily a person, right? You have to find it and hold on to that because that's the thing that maybe that can kind of get you back locked in with where you need to be. And that's a way that I approach it. And of course, I didn't call it my constant, probably early on because I hadn't seen the show, but now that's what I kind of refer to it as. And I'm a big pop culture person. I love TV and movies, so it's easy for me to go to that. But that'd be my advice: is find that thing that kind of brings you back in those moments of darkness. Tova knows this, but the worst moment of my life probably was within the last 3 years, and it literally in a moment when I found out I was laid off and my father had cancer, all within the span of a week. I stand here today a much stronger human being. But if I didn't build a support system, the way I would have reacted to that over that span of time, I can't tell you what it would have been. It probably wouldn't have been good. So we do need to find that for ourselves. And there is no simple answer to it in the long run, but you have to search for it. And that is maybe some soul searching. And for some people, that's meditation or something like that. I guess for me, sitting down by myself with a board game is meditation, right? But everyone has something like that in their life. That's just my way.
Um, I don't know if I'm going to find a question at the end of this comment. So Riley, be ready with a question.
Okay, I'm on it.
But I just want to highlight a couple of things as someone who does know you. And if people are, listening to you, and thinking, well, I don't have time to do all this. I do want to highlight that, um, you work as you're building these jobs and these companies, you are always busy, and your wife works a very busy full-time job, as well as having her own passions, as well as being both of you being very, very active in our community as volunteers. And you have two children, and you are both very, very involved in your children's life. And so but what I also see is I see your children involved in your volunteering. And one thing that I love is like when you're sharing pictures on Instagram or whatever, or you're just telling me about like, hey, we just played this board game together. So one thing that I think that is really important that you have continued to do, and your passion does lend itself to this, obviously, but you know, you have continued to say like, hey, I find peace and comfort in board games. This is my passion, or in Lost. And we don't have to share your children's names, but like you're a really big fan of Lost if you know your children's names. And like we find peace and comfort in these board games, but you also get a reminder anytime you play with your children how important board games are to the family unit, to the community, to individuals. And I think that that is something that is so important to remember to do, like when you're building a business, especially, or building a life that's based in a passion, to remember why it was your passion to start, like why you're writing the story where this is like one of the main purposes in your life. Because sometimes it's easy to forget when you get caught up with like the hustle. And I know we're not going to use that word, but right now you are hustling to build your company and to build like specifically the traveling board games. You are really hustling. And I'm sure when you sit down with your kids and you play the board games, you're reminded as why you think this is such an important thing to bring into other people's lives. And I think that's just something to remember how important it is when you are bringing your passion into your own life, that it's just important to remember like why it's your passion in the first place. And I think that you really do such a good job of that. So that is just a couple of things I wanted to highlight that you didn't necessarily mention, but I know, but also things that you've mentioned. And now
Well,
I turn it over, or you can say
well, let me.
something.
I will say it's true, and I think one of the biggest things, and the reason I talk about this, because in my life, one of the things I've noticed is that, and my kids have played games, period. Does not necessarily board games, games, period, since they were young. We cannot have dinner without a game. It's not possible anymore. They will ask for one. And it's a wonderful thing. Even sometimes I'm tired. I'm like, oh, can we just sit? Right. In reality, that is sometimes what my reaction is. But the important thing is we live in a time with so much technology. Like we are sitting here talking to each other right through technology. And we're constantly exposed to screens. So to escape that and get back to this physical kind of experience of a game where we're picking up pieces, where we're rolling dice, whatever we're doing, it's incredibly important. The other thing is the social aspect. So a big aspect of this, and I've seen this in my life between relatives and people outside my life, where I've seen just mentally as we get older and we lose members of our community because of unfortunately age, right? That happens. People pass as we get older and we move or whatever it might be. If you find communities or you have these community events where you have socialization as an option, it makes an incredibly important mental impact. The other thing with kids and with family in particular is it also makes us think. So when I have two wonderful kids, two very different kids. My daughter, candidly, not as good at math and reading as my son was. And my son, I always joke, he comes home and he's like, did you do your homework? Yeah, I did at school. My daughter's gonna be a very different scenario when she's at the same age. And I know that, and that's okay. But they both are forward thinking in being strategic because they're playing games where they have to think. So we're training people's brains to kind of think in the moment and make good decisions. And I think that's part of it. And look, you mentioned family, and I'll just say it, and it's probably not a surprise based on what you said, Tova. My family is number one. None of it, all this other stuff doesn't matter without them. So they are still the most important thing. And I would not put them at risk in anything that I did. So that is the hard part. I starting all this and doing it. That's why I mentioned saying to my wife, "Are you okay if I try to do this?" Because I had to say I'm going to dedicate to doing this because I can't just take some job that's going to be, in an office somewhere 35 hours a week and do the business. It's not going to work. And I got the blessing because that's important. And it's a partnership. And I view relationships as a partnership in that way. And then with my kids, I have a job that I have to get done. I have to be there for them. So being present is another reason why this is, I think, mentally so much better for me because I'm spending the time with them. I'm able to be home. I'm able to do pickups. So even in that moment where we're spending less money in other areas too, for what it's worth. So there is a strategic aspect to it, but it is about time with them, So and that's why when I mentioned New York City, it was killing me as the kids got older because I was like, I'm not getting back till 7 in the morning, 7 at night, and I'm leaving at 7 in the morning. Like this is not life, right? So, but I thank you for bringing that up because again, that my family is incredibly important. This community, um, I think sees that with a lot of people, and we've got a lot of people who are very family focused, and that's why this place is also home for me, and it's why I want to give back, and I think that's the biggest thing is if you can give back to a place, you're also going to find a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah, we need to take another quick break. But I want to just put this out there to think about before we do that. And it's, you're talking a lot about family and building a business and kind of creating a future that suits your values, right? What is important to you and where your heart lies. And I want to sort of take that out into what you were just starting to talk about, which is sort of the macro experience of like, what is your hope for yourself for the future and for your impact that you want to leave, not just on your family, because obviously we want that as parents, but like for the community at large. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, Chris, you can sort of chime in on that if that's okay. So we will be right back after this break, everyone.
Hey there, Pod family. Have you ever wished you could stay in the loop with a little slice of transformation and inspiration delivered straight to your inbox? Well, you're in luck because now you can. Introducing our fantastic newsletter, your VIP pass to all things exciting and informative. Join our community of growth-minded souls. Get the hottest topics delivered right to your inbox. It's quick, easy, and totally free. Just head over to our website at goboldlyinitiative.com and sign up for our newsletter today. Don't miss out on the next big thing. Stay connected with us. Subscribe now and get ready for some big, bold love.
Okay, so welcome back to the show. Before the break, Chris, I was just hoping you would give us like the 30,000-foot view of, what do you see in the next kind of chapter? Where do you see yourself going? And how are you making those decisions? Like, where are they coming from for you?
I think for me, the biggest thing is taking every day one step at a time, being prepared that something might not work. The business piece might be something that turns into a much bigger piece. It might be just what it is that turns into we run events and maybe it makes me a little bit extra and I'm doing the marketing contract work full time. And I'm just continuing to go out and build business that way. But it is a flexible approach and it's one that I have to constantly be willing to pivot. Uh, and that's okay. And I'm happier in that sense. I had a great conversation. I remember I had a conversation with actually my sister, and she said, I think you're going to be better at this than working in corporate. And she was right. because it ultimately is something where I can shape my day, and that itself makes it a better experience. And yes, I'm working. Here's the thing I always tell people is I see a future where yes, I'm working late nights sometimes and sometimes just completely not working in the morning at all. And but another day it's gonna be completely different. And that's all okay. Because in the long run, I'm still gonna work. I'm still gonna get the job done. And the hardest part really is if you've got seven, eight, nine different people you're doing stuff for, you got to give them all your, best, right? And that's the hardest part. So it's the time management. But I think we're in a time frame where it's become easier to do that. I have embraced some tools for helping me manage that. AI has even helped me a little bit in kind of streamlining some of the way I do certain things as well. And then just day-to-day management, just being checking the calendar for the next few days ahead of, at the end of the day, knowing where my day is going. And honestly, the most important thing is communication. And that is with anyone in your life who's important. So for me, part of the way that's going to work is also being really clear and communicative with those in my life, such as my wife, who is an important role in her job. And I need to be able to support her and encourage her to follow her dreams as well and be able to cover for her when she's got big events. So it's that communication to know that and then be able to kind of plan around it. So uh, I don't envision the next 2 years being easy, but I envision them being something that is rewarding. And so that's the biggest goal. And in the long run, setting that example that hard work it's not hard work and luck might coincide at times, and that's okay. And hard work doesn't always mean you make millions of dollars, but it does mean that at the end of the day, you feel this sense of satisfaction and that you did the right thing, and the right thing is incredibly important. And that's something I want to make sure my kids are always left with, and people feel when they see me that, hey, he does the right thing. I trust him. Because that also gets me business. I'm not going to lie. When I'm out in the community,
Of
I'm doing
course.
some things. That is also building trust because people see what I'm doing.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one thing you said, and then I'll turn it over to Tova for the quick response questions. But you mentioned hard work, and I think generationally we were raised to think hard work might mean being unhappy, right? Like it might not be fun. You might not enjoy it. You might just have to slog through it, make your money and retire and move to Florida or whatever it was, in the 80s, 90s, whatever. Um, and I think it's really important for us as that generation to acknowledge for ourselves that, like, underneath it all, sometimes we still feel that way, like, oh, I'm enjoying this too much. It can't be work. Or, and I guess, and really to talk to our kids about that, like, yeah, we want you to work hard. I want you to like put your whatever today's best effort is into the thing you're doing. Um, I don't want you to be miserable. Like, I don't want you to be unhappy. I don't want you to have a corporate job if you're not, like, your temperament is not set up for corporate, right? Like, we all have personalities. And so I just wanted to highlight that for people listening because I think a lot of our listeners are in our generation, first of all, but a lot of us forget that, like, you don't have to suffer to do hard work, right? Like, it just because it has the word hard in it doesn't mean it's like a sad, miserable thing to be doing. I mean, sometimes it is, right? Like, there's some things, we have like going to the dentist or whatever. That's not fun. But like, like you've got to, it's okay to enjoy it. And sometimes I feel like we all forget that. So that's my thought on that.
Um, okay, should we hop into our quick response questions?
Yeah, unless you have
All right.
another
I no, I mean I have like 100,
so
but
many, right? I
I
always have
know,
so
I
many. I could
know.
ask all day.
The only thing, if I could
Yeah.
add, the only
Yeah,
thing I would add
please.
is I think it's funny because I see all the time there's memes out there about, oh, the millennial, they want this happiness or whatever, and happiness is not a work is not bad, but there is a balance that I think you have to find. It doesn't mean the 9 to 5 needs to be, yay, my job is
Yeah.
amazing. Most people don't have that. All right, let's be real. Most people don't have that. I always go, you mentioned Justin Bieber earlier. I always think about Jared Padalecki. Tova's probably not surprised I'm going to mention Jared. Um, I always mention Jared Padalecki. because Jared is a person who is actor on one of my favorite television shows, which I also podcast on. I do a recap podcast. It's another thing, of course. Uh, and that podcast I mentioned partially because I do that with a coworker at a place I used to work, and that friendship is stronger than ever. So again, wonderful thing coming out of a place that, candidly, I wish I never left. I wish I had stayed there. I loved being there. But Jared is one of the stars on this show. And Jared, if you have followed the guy online, has gone through so much in terms of these challenges, that same kind of self-doubt, successful, wealthy, star of a show that was on TV for 15 years. Money and all these other things don't mean happy. So we have to find that balance. I don't know if you've ever looked it up, but go back and look at some of these favorite shows from our childhood and look how miserable the actual experiences on the show were. Boy Meets World, I've heard nightmares about what some of the experiences on that show were for some
Yeah.
actors. So finding a balance is so important. And it's not about being rich. It's not about anything like that. It is about finding a median for yourself where you can be and just say, I'm happy with my life. And it's not easy. And that's why a lot of people in 2025 have therapy. Um, I don't know if therapy is at its highest peak. I don't know, but it's got to be, if there's a track of how many people have therapy in the past decade, it's gone up. And I know it for a fact. So, it's like, to me, I pointed out because I look at the world and I say, what can I do to be happy? And I was not happy for 5, 6, 7 years when I look back, respectively. And I am happy now, and I am myself now. And so throw away what you think people think of you, and find your joy, be yourself, and find a way to at least experience some joy in your day every day, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself nuts. So.
That would be a great place to end the podcast.
I know. I was just thinking that. That's just like a very good closeout.
Yeah, exactly.
We need our fun questions.
Except
we need
that
our
lighthearted
questions.
Yeah, we have 5 sort of lighthearted, quick response questions.
Sure.
We can't actually follow up, so they're just fun, little questions to wrap it up as we close out. So, if you're ready,
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. What's your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
My favorite way to unwind after a long day is going to be something I already said, but it is going to be sitting down with friends or family, and very often just asking them what do they want to play, and then just sitting down and playing a game together. And that could be a video game, that could be a board game, but it's just something that we are doing together, whether it be friends or family. And it's a social experience. So in the end, the answer is socializing with people who matter to me and in my life at the end of the day.
What's one thing on your bucket list that you haven't done yet?
Oh, so bucket listing that I really want to do is, I have my family history back to the 1100s. And the only way to do family history at this point is to go to the town and hope that there's more records in the church. So I have to go over to the UK at some point. It was a trip that my father and I were going to do together. So now my goal and bucket list is to take my son and give him the experience that I was hoping my dad and I were going to have. But that is kind of my big bucket list item, is to go do that trip to the UK and go see if we can dig up more history.
Awesome. What's your go-to comfort food?
Oh, you know what? I think it's strange how it's evolved, but my go-to comfort food at this point has probably become, I don't know if you've seen these at the store, but it's yogurt chobani, but they've mixed it almost takes like an orange creamsicle. So I'm not having ice cream, but they've mixed whatever it's like an orange cream. So it's not like ice cream. It's better for you. But you stir and mix it up and it tastes like an orange creamsicle. And that's I love it because it's a little bit better for me, but just satisfying enough.
If you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
So I bought a ukulele in 2010 after a trip to Hawaii, and I still don't know how to play this thing. So if I could just instantly master how to play that ukulele, that'd be awesome. Because it's sat here and it has, I'm not gonna lie, a plug-in that I can plug it into my soundboard. And like I clearly thought I was gonna do something with this, and I have not.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh my goodness. 3 words. Um, this is hard. Let me see. Let me think about this one. I would say uh ooh, hold on, give me a moment on this one. I know you this is the hardest question I think I've ever been asked. I love it. I would say social, definitely one. Social. I would say passionate. And I would say I as a last one, I guess I would just say, oh my gosh, hold on. So social, I want to give you a better clip here. Um, it's hard. Social, I will say passionate, and I will say, and I know it's similar, but I'm going to also say overly enthusiastic because sometimes I get a little more than people can handle. So, but I admit that self knowledge is important.
Yeah, self-awareness is key, right?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for being on the show today. I think, we could ask you a bajillion more questions. Um, I really appreciate the twists and turns of your story and sharing it with folks that are listening because, not everything is linear and that's like 100% okay. So I hope people take that away from our conversation today. And I would love for people to be able to find you online and wherever or however you want people to find you. Could you share some of that with us?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Christopher Barrows. I'll come up pretty quick. So I always say, feel free to connect up me on LinkedIn. Just do me a favor, share in the note where you found me, just because I, I, we, I get a lot of those notifications, and it helps when there's a note. I would ask people to go check out some of the stuff that I do. Traveling Boards is travelingboards.com. We do have a website redesign in process, so some will see the newest one when it's out, but it's not out yet at the time of us talking. In addition, Tabletop Express is that passion project that I started during COVID that has turned into a really welcoming community. So if you're ever interested in learning more about board games, we've got a wide array of videos, and we do live streams every other week and have a ton of fun. And more than anything, if you're someone who does needs digital marketing help and all that stuff, when you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see why I do it. Um, but I just, like I said, I hope you'll take that time. And I'll just say this, not a link, but when you see those people out there looking for work who have these skill sets, a lot of them are looking right now in this time. And I'm sure this is going to be true years from now. Consider those people who've been in the space and give them a shot to do some work because there's so many talented people. And so that's not a pitch for me. That's just a pitch for people in the industry itself. Because I think it's important that we support one another. So, but yeah, feel free to say hi, and I'll give you, and of course, any links if you want to include them anywhere after the fact.
Yeah, we're going to drop those in our show notes for everyone and share everything on our social media so you all have access to it. Chris, it has been fantastic talking to you. Thank you for meeting with us today and sharing this conversation.
Yes, thanks.
Tova, do you have any last?
No, I mean, we didn't get to talk about the library trustee. We
I
didn't talk
know.
about our full day K, which is how we met. We barely touched on, Back in the Hunt, your supernatural podcast. I mean, so many things, so many things. But no, we really appreciate you coming on. You're the second boy we've had on, so there will be others. But we really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, I hopefully everyone who listens just subscribes and keeps coming back to your podcast because I think you're doing great work.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We will be back next week with another interview talking all about figuring out your story. How are you going to rate it? Until then, have a fantastic week, and we will see you all right back here.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.